The 911 call lasted 14 minutes and 37 seconds, but it wasn't Courtney Love who made it. When she found out Kurt Cobain was dead on April 8, 1994, at 9:47 a.m., Courtney was on a plane 30,000 feet above Arizona, and her first words weren't spoken to emergency services, but whispered into a flight attendant's tape recorder that happened to be documenting an entirely different incident. What Courtney said in those first 90 seconds after receiving the news would contradict everything she would say publicly for the next 30 years. But the most chilling part wasn't her words. It was what happened at minute 3:14, when she suddenly stopped crying and said a name nobody had ever connected to Kurt before, followed by a phone number she demanded the pilot call immediately. The tape remained in an airline security vault for 27 years, part of a routine incident report that had nothing to do with Kurt's death initially. When it was finally discovered during a storage facility audit in 2021, investigators realized they had captured the raw, unfiltered moment when one of rock's most controversial figures learned her husband was gone, and her reaction suggested she knew something about his death that she's never admitted publicly. But to understand why Courtney was on that plane and not in Seattle with Kurt, and why her first words were check the greenhouse now, when nobody had told her where Kurt's body was found, we need to go back 36 hours earlier. April 6, 1994. Courtney Love was at the Peninsula Hotel in Beverly Hills, frantically organizing what she called the intervention that would save Kurt's life. She had assembled a team that included private investigator Tom Grant, Dylan Carlson, Kurt's best friend, and several addiction specialists. The plan was simple: fly to Seattle on April 8th, confront Kurt, and force him back into rehab. But something happened on the morning of April 7th that changed everything. Courtney received a phone call at 6:23 a.m. from someone she would later identify only as a friend in Seattle. After that call, she abruptly changed her plans, booking a flight not to Seattle but to Phoenix, where her mother lived. I needed to get Frances somewhere safe, Courtney would later explain, referring to her and Kurt's young daughter. But Frances was already with a nanny in Los Angeles, not with Courtney. So why was we really flying to Phoenix? The flight? America West Airlines Flight 3097 departed LAX at 8:15 a.m. on April 8th. Courtney was in first class, seat 2A. In seat 2B was Rosemary Patterson, a music journalist who recognized Courtney but didn't initially approach her. What neither of them knew was that flight attendant Maria Gonzalez was wearing a small tape recorder as part of an airline program, documenting customer service interactions. At 9:47 a.m., as the plane flew over Arizona, the lead flight attendant approached Courtney with the plane's satellite phone, an extremely unusual occurrence in 1994 that required special authorization from the cockpit. "Ms. Love," the attendant said quietly, "you have an emergency call from Seattle." What happened next was captured in crystal-clear audio on Maria Gonzalez's recorder, which was positioned just 3 feet away from Courtney's seat. The caller was Eric Erlandson, Courtney's whole bandmate, who had been tasked with checking on Kurt at the Seattle house. His voice, though not clearly audible on the recording, can be heard as a muffled tone through the phone's earpiece. But Courtney's responses tell the entire story. "What do you mean you found him?" Courtney's voice starts strong, almost angry. "Found him where?" There's a pause as Eric responds. "The greenhouse," Courtney says, and her voice changes completely. It's not a question, it's a statement. He did it in the greenhouse. This is the critical moment that investigators would later focus on. Eric hadn't told her where Kurt was found. She had said it herself. How did she know? Is he? Courtney starts to ask, then stops. For 7 seconds, there's silence, except for the sound of the plane's engines. Then, in a voice so quiet the recorder barely pitched it up, she says, "Tom was right." Tom Grant, the private investigator Courtney had hired, had told her on April 7th that he believed Kurt was already dead, and that she should prepare herself. But Courtney had dismissed him, accused him of being pessimistic. Now her first thought was that Tom had been right all along. What Courtney said next stunned everyone who would later hear the recording. "Did you check for the note? There should be a note. He promised there would be a note. The word promised would become the focus of intense scrutiny. When had Kurt promised her there would be a note? When had they discussed this? Eric's response caused Courtney to suddenly become hysterical. No, 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 that's not right. He said it would be addressed to me and Francis. If it's not addressed to us, then something's wrong. For the next 2 minutes, Courtney alternates between sobbing and making demands that don't seem to make sense to anyone listening. Call Tom McNally right now. Check his left pocket. Don't let them move him until you check. Was the door locked from the inside? Count the shells. Each instruction suggests a level of specific knowledge about the scene that she shouldn't have had. Tom McNally was later identified as a Seattle music promoter who had no known connection to Kurt's death. The significance of checking his left pocket was never explained. The detail about counting shells would prove particularly disturbing when it was revealed that investigators had indeed found a discrepancy in the shell count at the scene. At minute 3:14, Courtney suddenly stopped crying and said clearly, "Michael Dewitt knows. Call Michael Dewitt." 2006, 5. This was the same Michael Dewitt who had been Courtney's ex-boyfriend, one Kurt had accused her of contacting in their final fight. Why would he know anything about Kurt's death? The flight attendant can be heard asking Courtney if she needs medical attention. Courtney's response is lucid and controlled. "I need you to tell the pilot to call that number. Tell Michael that it happened, and he needs to go to the house now." When investigators later called the number Courtney had provided, it had been disconnected. Michael Dewitt, when questioned years later, denied any knowledge of Kurt's death beyond what was reported in the media. For the next 5 minutes, Courtney makes a series of statements that would later be analyzed by forensic psychologists. "He did it on the 5th, didn't he? I knew it would be the 5th. This is my fault. I shouldn't have left him alone with them. Check the attic too. He might have left something in the attic. Francis can never know about Rome. Promise me Francis will never know about Rome." The reference to them, plural, suggested Kurt wasn't alone when he died. The mention of the attic was particularly strange, as Kurt's body was found in the greenhouse, not the main house. The Rome reference was to Kurt's overdose in March, but why was she so adamant that Francis never know about it? At minute 8:22, Rosemary Patterson, the journalist in seat 2B, made a decision that would define her career. She pulled out her own tape recorder and began recording Courtney's side of the conversation more clearly. "Courtney was in a state I've never seen before or since," Patterson later wrote. "She wasn't just grieving, she was furious. She kept saying they weren't supposed to do it this way, and this isn't what we agreed." The phrase, "this isn't what we agreed," would become one of the most controversial elements of the recording. Who was we? What had been agreed? At minute 9:15, Courtney demanded to speak to someone else. The phone was apparently passed to someone at the scene, and Courtney's tone changed completely, from grief-stricken widow to someone giving orders. "You need to control the narrative. Say he was depressed about his stomach. Don't mention the intervention. Don't mention the divorce papers. And for God's sake, don't let anyone see the other note." The other note reference sent shockwaves through the investigation. The official report stated that only one suicide note was found. What other note was Courtney referring to? At minute 11:30, Courtney said something that would haunt investigators for years. "Is Callie there? Keep Callie away from the journalists. He knows too much." Michael Callie Dewitt, no relation to Michael Dewitt, was a live-in nanny at the Cobain house, who had allegedly been in the house while Kurt's body lay undiscovered in the Hintanks. Why would he know too much? What did he know? The most chilling moment came at minute 12:45, when Courtney, now speaking barely above a whisper, said, "He wasn't supposed to use the gun. That wasn't the plan." Why did he use the gun? This statement suggested that there had been a plan for Kurt's death that involved a different method. Was she suggesting Kurt had planned his suicide with her knowledge, or was she referring to something else entirely? The call ended with Courtney giving specific instructions about who should be called and in what order. David Geffen, record executive. 2. Gold Mountain, management. 3. Her lawyer. 4. MT. Rolling Stone. Notably absent from this list, Kurt's mother, his sister, or any of his family members. After hanging up, Courtney remained eerily calm for several minutes. Then, according to both Maria Gonzalez and Rosemary Patterson, she said something that nobody has been able to explain. April 8th. He promised it wouldn't be until the 10th. Why did he do it early? This suggested that Kurt's death had been planned and scheduled, but that he had acted ahead of schedule. The implications of this statement were staggering. The plane landed in Phoenix at 10:45 a.m. Courtney was met at the gate by two men in suits who have never been identified. She left with them immediately, leaving her luggage behind. She wouldn't resurface publicly until the next day when she flew to Seattle. The 911 call that was actually made about Kurt's death came from Gary Smith, the electrician who discovered the body. That call, made at 8:40 a.m. Seattle time, was straightforward and clinical. But there was another 911 call made that morning that has received less attention. At 9:15 a.m., 32 minutes before Courtney was informed on the plane, someone called 911 from a payphone near the Cobain house and said, "You need to check the greenhouse at 171 Lake Washington Boulevard. There's been an accident." They hung up before giving their name. The voice was female. The call was made before any public announcement of Kurt's death. Who made this call? And how did they know? When Tom Grant, the private investigator, heard the airplane recording in 2021, he made a stunning observation. Courtney's reaction wasn't surprise about Kurt being dead. It was surprise about the timing and method. She expected him to die, just not then and not that way. The recording also revealed something that had been hidden from the public. Courtney had been taking notes during the call. Rosemary Patterson managed to photograph one page of these notes, which included
Greenhouse, how did he get in?
check security tapes, Rome connection, and de-involvement level. Francis alibi, solid, destroy February tape. The reference to Francis' alibi was particularly disturbing as Francis was only 20 months old. Why would a toddler need an alibi? And what was the February tape that needed to be destroyed? In the days following Kurt's death, several people who had been at the Seattle house reported that Courtney's behavior didn't match the narrative of a surprised, grieving widow. She seemed to know exactly where to look for specific items, what to destroy, and what to preserve. Dylan Carlson later revealed that when he called Courtney to officially confirm Kurt's death after Eric's initial call, her first words were, "Did they find both notes?" When he said only one moan was found, she reportedly said, "Then they didn't look hard enough." The airline recording also captured a conversation Courtney had with another passenger after ending her phone call. The passenger, trying to comfort her, said something about God's plan. Courtney's response was shocking. God had nothing to do with this. This was all very human and very planned. The only surprise is that he went through with it. When the tape was analyzed by linguistic experts in 2021, they noted that Courtney used past tense to refer to Kurt even before she had confirmed he was dead. "He was so talented," she said at one point. Not, "He is so talented." This suggested she already knew he was gone. The recording revealed another crucial detail. Courtney had been carrying Kurt's passport with her on the plane. When asked by the flight attendant if she needed anything from her bag, she pulled out the passport and said, "He won't be needing this anymore." This was before anyone had officially confirmed Kurt was dead. Perhaps most significantly, the recording captured Courtney making a phone call immediately after her conversation with Eric. This call, lasting only 90 seconds, was to a number in Los Angeles. She said only one thing that was clearly audible: "It's done." But not how we discussed. Years later, that number was traced to a phone booth in West Hollywood, making it impossible to determine who received the call. The flight attendant, Maria Gonzalez, kept the recording in her possession for years, not realizing its significance until she saw a documentary about Kurt's death in 2020. When she finally brought it to authorities, they said that while it raised questions, it wasn't enough to reopen the case. The recording suggests foreknowledge and possibly conspiracy, one investigator noted off the record, but it's not proof. It's disturbing, but not definitively criminal. Rosemary Patterson, the journalist who was on the plane, wrote in her 20, "What I witnessed wasn't a woman learning about her husband's death. It was a woman learning that a plan had gone wrong. Her grief was real, but it was mixed with anger and fear about something beyond just losing Kurt. She kept saying they, never he. It was always they did this, or they weren't supposed to. Who were they? The recording also captured something that happened after they landed. As Courtney was leaving the plane, she turned to Maria Gonzalez and said, "If anyone asks, I wasn't on this flight. I was driving to Phoenix. Can you do that for me?" Maria, confused, agreed. It would be years before she understood what she had agreed to cover up. The existence of this recording has raised more questions than answers. How did Courtney know Kurt was in the greenhouse before being told? What was the plan she kept referencing? Who was supposed to receive the call to the Los Angeles phone booth? What was on the February tape she wanted destroyed? Why did she have Kurt's passport with her? Who were the two men who met her in Phoenix? Today, the airplane recording remains one of the most controversial pieces of evidence related to Kurt Cobain's death. While it doesn't prove any criminal wrongdoing, it suggests a level of foreknowledge and planning that contradicts the official narrative of a surprised widow learning about her husband's sudden suicide. Courtney Love has never publicly acknowledged the recording's existence. When asked about it through her attorney in 2022, the response was, "Ms. Love has no comment on alleged recordings that may or may not exist. Her focus remains on preserving Kurt's legacy and protecting their daughter's privacy." Frances Bean Cobain, now an adult, has reportedly heard the recording but has never commented publicly on its contents or implications. The truth about what Courtney knew and when she knew it may never be fully revealed, but the airplane recording provides a window into those crucial first moments after Kurt's death, moments that suggest the story we've been told for 30 years may not be the complete truth. If this revelation about Courtney's recorded reaction moved you, make sure to subscribe and hit that thumbs up button. Share this video with someone who needs to know the hidden truths behind rock's most famous tragedy. What will you think Courtney really knew? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to ring that notification bell for more exclusive revelations about music's darkest mysteries.